Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Secretary Adeyemo, welcome back. Under President Biden, the Treasury Department has advanced a number of troubling international policies, some of which are clearly intended to circumvent the will of Congress. Let's take sanctions to start with. The administration has offered sanctions relief to some of our adversaries in the unrealistic hope that they'll make concessions inimical to their very nature. Consider Iran, for instance. To entice Iran to re-enter the flawed JCPOA, the administration appears willing to lift sanctions on Iran. Then the administration hopes that Iran will commit to cease supporting terrorism and to curb its ballistic missiles program. But let's be clear. Once sanctions are lifted, Iran will never limit its malign behavior. The administration clearly intends to repeat the mistakes of the Obama administration and re-enter a treaty with Iran despite bipartisan opposition and without Senate approval. In addition, the administration has repeatedly failed to comply with mandatory sanctions laws. Also, let's look at Iran. Since President Biden was elected, according to the International Energy Agency, Iran has doubled the amount of crude oil it's selling to China to 600,000 barrels each day this year. Even though these sales are illegal under sanctions laws, the administration has refused to impose congressionally required sanctions on the Chinese buyers. Take the case of Russia. The administration has also chosen to ignore a law requiring sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The pipeline's project manager has been using sanctioned Russian entities to construct and finance Nord Stream 2, meaning that the manager's integral role in the pipeline is predicated on a massive sanctions evasions campaign. Congress passed the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, or CATSA, to punish, among other things, this very type of conduct, sanctions evasion. Congress did this because sanctions evasion harms U.S. national security interests, and in this instance, it's increasing Putin's malign influence over Europe. But the administration continues to violate this statute in order to give Putin a pass. Take the OECD tax agreement. As if all this weren't enough, the administration is trying now to enact an international tax treaty that will harm U.S. competitiveness, and to do it without obtaining the necessary two-thirds approval of the Senate. You will recall the tax increase consists of two pillars. Pillar one is an unprecedented treaty change that would allow foreign countries to tax American companies based on the American company's sales overseas. It's a big tax revenue transfer from us to them. Unsurprisingly, this is the priority for other countries who've long sought this tax transfer. Pillar two is a 15% global minimum tax on multinationals' foreign income. Now, this is the administration's attempt to justify the huge tax increase it wants to impose on U.S. companies. Unsurprisingly, this is the administration's priority, since it's an integral part of dismantling the successful 2017 tax reforms. But by imploring other countries to implement a global minimum tax that will harm their own workers and businesses, the administration has implicitly acknowledged that their proposed multinational tax increase will make U.S. workers and businesses less competitive if other countries either don't implement a global minimum tax of their own or implement a significantly lower rate than what the administration is proposing. But here's a problem. There's a very real possibility that other countries will not implement the global minimum tax. They've only reluctantly agreed to that global minimum tax as a condition, in return for getting Pillar 1, the U.S. tax revenue transferred to them. But as I say, implementing Pillar 1 requires two-thirds approval in the Senate, and I don't think that's going to happen. So the administration is either going to impose its own global minimum tax increase on American companies anyway, without the countries we compete with having enacted a corresponding tax increase, or they're going to violate the Constitution by modifying our existing tax treaties without obtaining the two-thirds consent of the Senate. Let's turn quickly to the FSOC Climate Risk Report. This is the latest troubling international policy proposal from the administration. Expect this report to come out soon. It's likely to claim that global warming poses a systemic risk to the financial system. Now, I acknowledge that global warming is real. However, it does not follow from this that there's a new systemic risk to the financial system. We have had severe weather events since the dawn of time. And as the economist John Cochrane has explained to this committee, major weather events, and I quote, have never come close to causing a systemic financial crisis, end quote. And there's no scientifically validated possibility to change this in the near future. Our Democratic colleagues should acknowledge this reality and offer their proposals on climate change through the legislative process, which they're doing, including calling for a carbon tax, in which this very dangerous tax and spend measure they're contemplating will make energy prices higher. But that legislative approach is not enough for our Democratic colleagues. They also want to use the unaccountable financial regulators to really misuse their power and essentially cut off the supply of capital to fossil fuel companies. Well, all across America, we're already seeing what happens when the regulatory environment discourages the development of necessary energy sources. Energy prices spike. This dynamic will only get much worse if financial regulators are pressured to starve the energy sector of the capital it needs to provide America the energy that we all need. Deputy Secretary Adeyemo, I look forward to discussing these issues with you today.